Welcome to Under the Fig Tree podcast. In today's episode, hosts Reverend Micah Glenn and Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt sit down with a special guest as they meditate under the fig tree.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Under the Fig Tree. I'm Ben. How are you today, bro?
I'm really good because you said, what's up?
And now that everybody's listening and now that they're tuned in, we all know that they're sorely disappointed that I'm actually present on set today and that you didn't get to introduce the episode.
Like I texted to the team after a couple of them watched the episode, listened to the episode. I made sure that they did. The proper emoji in response is the face palm.
Oh, man. It was so great.
100%.
From a distance, I was proud of when I got a notification. I was like, oh, the episode's out. I was like, let me listen now.
I couldn't even make it through without laughing.
It was so good. Oh, it was awesome. Well, anyway, it's springtime. How are your allergies, man? Mine are real bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Mine are. I actually recently had to back off the Zyrtec a little bit because I was drying out. That's way too much information for our listeners, but mine won't get bad until grass season hits, which is usually 1st of May or so.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
I was like itchy-eyed yesterday. I was like, what's happening? And then as we were walking through the park, I saw buds on the trees, and I was like, oh,
right?
Here we go. It's that time.
Our listeners, viewers should know that the flowers are starting to come up out of the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And
as soon as we get like a week of non-freezing weather,
yeah,
it's spring in St. Louis.
And it's 50, 55 degrees, and it's glorious and beautiful. It wasn't last week when we were in Kalispell, Montana, and I got these shoes shined in the Denver airport, which I was super excited about. And then Micah dropped me off after I got into Kalispell, Montana at an establishment to have a beverage before our conference began, and I stepped in a huge mud puddle.
Just like a city slicker.
There could be worse things
Total
to step
city slicker.
There could be worse things to
That
step
is true.
in.
That is true.
We are joined by a special guest and another one of our neighbors here on campus, Dr.
Right.
Mart Thompson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Yes.
I'm enjoying spring also. I've been riding my bike around Forest Park. Hope
that's
to later
awesome.
today.
Oh, look at that. Yesterday, because the weather is changing, I like to work out. I'm getting back into running. Or like, as in like, not like, oh, I'm creeping back into it, getting back into it because of the season. It's not freezing outside.
Right.
And I thought about it yesterday, but it started to get cold for me in the early evening. And then the spring, like around here, we have like all of those dogwood trees. And once they start to flower, I am miserable for about a month. I take 2 antihistamines and a nose spray.
You're probably allergic to trees because Noah's allergic to trees, and when the dogwoods hit, that's tree pollen, oak pollen, maple.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never done an allergy test just because it's just for what? Dr. Thompson, do you want to let our listener know of your seasonal allergies?
I'm happy to say I don't have any.
God bless you. That is amazing. This is your first time on Under the Fig Tree.
It
ever.
is. Yes,
right.
it is.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank
this
you.
is a lot of fun, and we're excited to explore a number of different topics with you today. So, it's great to have you on.
Thank you for asking.
All right, so you've been a longtime pastor. Your son, Adam, classmate of mine from seminary, and now he's actually a pastor in Pittsburgh. He's not far from where Dorothy's parents have a house. We haven't been to Pittsburgh in a while, but I always assume it's like if we're ever there on a Sunday, which is hard because of work and travel with kids and stuff like that, and part-time moonlighting call.
You could preach for Adam. I'm sure he'd welcome that.
Well, see, the thing is that if I'm ever in Pittsburgh, I'm taking a break for preaching. So the answer would be, nah, doc. I'm sure he would appreciate it.
I understand.
But I want to go to his new congregation. I went to his congregation when he was in, Fair Lawn?
Yep,
near
right
Akron.
outside of Akron,
Yeah, a few times, and I had the opportunity to preach. But whenever we're there, it's just never quite. We never stay up till Sunday because we have to get home. But
sure.
But yeah, he's one of the 5-year mafia, if any of the guys are listening. So some of us stuck around for an extra year. So when I was at Westfield House, Adam was in Oberussel.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Oberussel guy.
Right.
Well, yeah. And so you've been a pastor for I was going to say a long time, but I was going to say quite some time.
28 years
there we
before being called full-time here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a long time to serve, but not as long as, you say a long time, it makes you,
Yeah.
I actually think that traditionally that was the model for most professors, that they would typically have 20 to 30 years in the parish before they came to seminary. And it's only a much newer thing that somebody like me would come to the seminary at 35.
But you have a few years. Like
I did
10,
have,
15?
I almost said almost 10.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's great to have colleagues here who really were spent significant time in the parish, because there are things that you only can see and understand and know about a parish and about its people by having been there for a good while. Did you have any these multiple generations where you like confirmed the kid and then you baptized their own kid?
At my last parish, it was close to that because I was there 16 years.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
Prior to that, not so much, but people would move back in the area, and that I had them earlier, say in confirmation, and then they became adult members of the congregation after they went away to college. So,
It's a beautiful thing to see, to watch a person go through their entire life and to stay with them through all these major milestones in life. That's pretty great. So we typically ask, what was your pathway into ministry? So take us down
a little memory lane here.
The Dr. Mart Thompson story.
Well, I went to a state university. I'd never been to a parochial school. I was raised, though, in an LCMS congregation, very faithful family. But the ministry was not on my radar screen at all. What's interesting is I heard years later that my pastor thought, because of the questions I asked, I was quite skeptical at times in confirmation. He thought that I might end up being a pastor someday, but he never communicated that to me, which was interesting. But I got involved in a Lutheran campus ministry in college. A little shout out to Missouri State University and the Lutheran Student Center. Kevin Golden on faculty, he's from there. A number of pastors throughout the synod have been through that campus ministry.
In Missouri State, it used to be something else.
Southwest Missouri.
There we go.
Well, it used to be other things too, like normal school. I mean, there's a variety of different things over the years.
It was called normal school?
Yeah, there were a lot of normal schools. They were teachers' colleges, two-year colleges. Okay. Yeah. This was back in the 40s and 50s.
You don't want to have to tell somebody they had to send me to normal school.
Yeah. No, that was the thing back in the day, I'm told. That was prior to my time. But yeah, it was Missouri, Southwest Missouri State.
That's right.
Teachers College, then Southwest Missouri State College, then university. But anyway, so it was during my time there, I was a pre-med major, chemistry, biology, math.
Love it.
And went into that because I had aptitude in that area. I did well. But as time went on, I found that it really wasn't something that I could envision myself doing for my entire life. I was more interested actually in the humanities. So I ended up graduating with a degree in antiquities, with ancient Near East and classical Roman antiquities. And that's because partway through I had a crisis of faith. It was related somewhat to like my comparative anatomy classes and things like that, where some of my skepticism kind of went to its nth degree. And it was during that time that we recently got a full-time campus pastor, and I started having theological conversations with him. And I describe it this way, that at some point I was moved by the Holy Spirit to let God out of this box that I was carrying him around in, this kind of rational box. And it opened my mind up to having kind of an open universe, if you will, not a closed universe. And started to think differently. And that led me to decide, you know what? I think I should go to the seminary and study more. But I really don't think I'm cut out to be a pastor, because I was scared to death of public speaking or any kind of speaking in front of people. Never had a background in that at all. And but I just wanted to study theology. I wanted to learn more about God and about the Word. And that led me to the seminary. And of course, there wasn't really a decision of which seminary to go to, because at that time I was dating and then ended up marrying before we graduated a young lady from St. Louis. And so coming to Concordia Seminary in St. Louis was the path and the plan. So came here and loved the classes. I was one of these weird guys who really loved those exegetical classes like hermeneutics and isagogics and all that, where we were learning about responses to higher critical thinking. Because that's what I was taught. I was steeped in that and had a lot of questions and issues with it. And so that, and then my vicarage experience, which was actually to a campus ministry setting. I guess they sent me there because that was a background I was familiar with. Convinced me that, I think you should be a pastor. I've got the gifts. And at this point, there's really not much else I can do. But seriously, it was a firm conviction that that's what God was calling me to do. So it was kind of a long process, but that was my journey.
And so you served a campus ministry, and then what other congregations and congregational ministry did you have?
So the campus ministry, I served as a vicar. They ended up calling me back there out of the seminary to serve. And because they needed to find a way to fund everything, they also attached it to a rural congregation. So I had an interesting dual parish, a very rural congregation full of farmers, and then this quite large campus ministry with college students. And that's where I served the first 4.5 years.
Usually they call that town and gown. So yours was farm and gown.
That would be an apt description. Yes, it would.
That's kind of fun, because those are, I come from the farm. That's kind of where I grew up in Indiana. And then I went to the university, and as Micah said earlier, maybe you said that on the podcast, or maybe you said that before, but I am a true city slicker.
I did say that. Yeah,
100% true.
Dress shoes.
Yeah. But a farm and gown is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So did you have people you had farmers that came to church and college students that came to church together?
It was interesting. We did integrate activities at times. And one thing that was fun this past fall, I was invited back to preach at an anniversary celebration, and at the campus, and a number of families from the farm came over and were at that service.
Nice.
And shared a lot of good old memories of when they came and hung out with the college students. But they were actually two very separate ministries, just because the context was so different.
Sure.
So I would have service on Sunday and Bible class on Sunday at the rural parish, and then the service at the campus was the late service, not the early morning.
Yeah.
It was like 11 o'clock. And then we had Bible studies during the week. And so there was not a lot of duplication, although we did have some fun integration of the two ministries. But they kind of flourished in their own realms.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so from your farm and gown, then where was next?
It was to a small town, Monette, Missouri, in southwest Missouri. So it's kind of halfway between Springfield and Joplin.
Okay.
And was there 8 years. And during that time, I learned about building projects, because we relocated from in the city, small town. Monette's a unique town, though. It population was around, I think, 7,000, but during the week, because of all the industry there, it was 15 to 20,000 people in town. But we relocated out on the highway, built this new church, kind of state-of-the-art stuff, and it was good. Really enjoyed that. Our children, that's kind of where they grew up in their elementary school years, very formative time. attended. We did not have a parochial school where I was at, but they attended a parochial school at a local Lutheran school in a nearby town. Mm-hmm. And so we really enjoyed that time there.
Nice. And then the call right before you came to seminary was...
Right, to a bedroom community of St. Louis. So a town called Peevely, and I was there 16 years. And during that time, I enjoyed being a field ed supervisor. Right. We also had vicars part of the time. So I got involved in the seminary that way, and which was good because I loved the seminary. I really enjoyed it. I loved ministry, but it was nice to be back here. I entered into the Doctor of Ministry program during that time. Mm-hmm. And when I completed that, they asked me if I would be interested in teaching some Doctor of Ministry classes and then some SMP classes. And so I started doing that, I think, around 2012.
Okay.
So about 12 years into being at Peevely.
Nice. And so you've been on the faculty here since 2016?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, very good. Same year my son Adam graduated.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, Dale Meyer said, well, we got to have another Thompson around here. So so Adam left and I came. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, one of the things that we often like to do with faculty that are on the show is just to talk a little bit about the classes that you teach, the kinds of topics that we cover in the basic curriculum, the Masters of Divinity curriculum. And there's a lot of similarities between the different curricula in regards to the practical topics, and you teach in the practical department.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your teaching, what kind of topics you typically teach here.
Sure. So earlier today, right before I came over here for this, I was teaching Pastoral Leadership and Theology. And you're familiar with that class.
I am,
You
yes.
teach that class too. It's a wonderful class to teach, especially, it's probably the best class to teach concluding students, right?
Yeah.
Because that class involves very much the practice of ministry, and they're getting ready for that. And the way we have it set up now is that after call day, after students receive their calls, they process those very calls. And we have them do research and write plans and all those kinds of things. And they're very engaged, right?
Yeah, they are. They care a lot about this. Isn't just hypothetical stuff. It's real stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But leading up to that, we spend time talking about pastoral leadership. We have a couple of courses where I think we do a very good job on that. And then we talk about some specific topics of pastoral leadership and pastoral care that they will be involved in. Today, the topic was pastoral visitation, and how do you go about having a regular visitation of your members? How do you handle kind of special circumstances? And they had just lots of questions. It's a lot of fun because they were on vicarage and they experienced this a little bit, but sometimes their experience leads them to then wonder about additional questions that they're going to face. They hear about other students sharing their experiences, and so we talk all those things through. And one question that came up today had to do with a student was on his vicarage was being there with the pastor at a funeral. And one of the people involved, the son whose mother had passed away, had something also kind of traumatic happen in his life that required pastoral care at that moment that totally caught him off guard. You're there to help with the funeral, and then you find out something else that has just rocked this person's world. I'm not going to go into what that was. But then we could talk through, well, how do you attend to something like that as a pastor? And I think it was a very fruitful conversation.
Well, the two of you have probably done more funerals than I have. And when I'm talking to guys that are in seminary thinking about it, there's always this moment where you're talking about preaching at a funeral, they're like, oh, it must be really tough. And it's like, actually, that's the easiest sermon to preach in the world. And it's the most joyful one. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, let me take you through it.
Yep.
And then it doesn't take long to get them to wrap their minds around, like, this is what's happening here. The promise of this is what Jesus came into the world to defeat. So it makes the preaching of it really easy, which means that I think for most of us, our best sermons are probably also then at funerals, which then is engaging to people who might be on the edge of Christianity, might be struggling with things themselves. And so in my experience of preaching funerals, I haven't done a ton of them, but I always end up with somebody like close to cause of death if it's something tragic like overdose, or on having these theological questions where, like, again, you just get to preach Jesus Christ, him crucified, for the redemption of your soul, for salvation, and he's going to raise you on the dead, where people are on that fringe of their own faith and things like that also then want to come and engage you and have further conversations. I've always experienced that in every funeral I've ever participated in or preached. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely true. Funerals, I think, are perhaps the greatest opportunities to rejoice in the gifts of Christ and to encourage one another in the faith, to find comfort and hope, as ironic as that sounds, in Christ alone. Now, we talk about it at the end of sermons a lot of times, the peace of God that surpasses all human understanding. And what you're experiencing at a Christian funeral that's preaching Christ crucified and risen is that peace in the midst of things that you can't really understand, right? Yeah. The other thing that I've observed over the years in the parishes where I've served is how the funerals were a real blessing to the congregation. It's so easy to kind of get stuck in a rut, even when things are going well, and you kind of forget exactly why you're here. And when you're confronted with the reality of death and the struggles and the challenges that brings, and you can really only turn to the risen Lord for hope and strength, it's like, oh yeah, that's why we're here. That's what this is all about. That's why we want to spread the good news. That's why we need more pastors, and that's why we want to reach out with Christ in our world that needs him so much.
Yeah, death is the great leveler. Everybody knows or should know that the track record on people defeating death is not very good, and you can put thinking about it off for a really long time, but you can't say that doesn't apply to me.
Right. That's right.
Or at least you shouldn't. So yeah, funerals, I always found that people leaned forward. They wanted to hear. They were there because they wouldn't be any other place, because they had just experienced a death. I always said, when a member died, they didn't call, all of these vocations are great vocations. They're auto mechanic, or they're a home builder, or the farmer that produced their food. They called their pastor, and there's something beautiful about that. The opposite is weddings. Weddings are the most difficult to preach because the bride and groom are thinking about the party and what's going to come later on in the evening, and they're excited about that, and all the guests are there just to have a good time, and so they're just saying, come on, Pastor, get on with it. So I always found I like preaching weddings because you're preaching to people that aren't necessarily there to hear the gospel, and you get to preach to them. Right. But funerals is the place where, in great faith, people are leaning forward and waiting for your word of comfort.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. The last funeral I preached, there were some people. Of course, there's always going to be non-Lutherans there, but I got this. Several people from the family came up to me that they've been struggling with different denominations, struggling with it. My pastor's been preaching about all these other things. Today, I appreciated your message about Jesus, him crucified for us, and then asked me, and this was new for me, because usually it's like, when is your service? But of course, they were going home. Is there a good Lutheran church near my home that maybe I could go and visit? and I was happy. Another classmate, Steve Roma, was close to them. I was like, well,
sure.
a great classmate of mine, and he's got a great ministry near you. Here's his congregation. You should look him up when you get home. Another 5-year Mafia guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it is just those moments. And so we've been talking about the preaching and funerals, but just also I wanted to lean into pastoral leadership a little bit, because there's all different types of leaderships, and every different type of scenario needs a different type of leader. And my dad, who's a S&P pastor, we were having these conversations where I never asked to be one of his mentors, but he started asking me questions. I'm like, well, Dad, I'm your son. I don't know if I'm the guy you should be asking. You should ask Dr. Thompson, ask Pastor Lesh. And he kept asking me these questions. I was like, okay, because I know him, right? And my dad was a drill instructor, 20 years in the Marine Corps. And we were having this conversation about his military leadership style and how he was going to get people together. I was like, I want to dare you to try this so it can blow up in your face, because every student needs a lesson like this. But you shouldn't march into your congregation like a drill instructor and start barking orders. It won't go well for you, no matter the congregation. I don't even think it would work on a military base, to be honest with you. But can you just kind of maybe for our listeners briefly define, like, what's just kind of the 30,000-foot view of pastoral leadership? What are we talking about? And then if there's some couple of examples that we can chat about, just so they can see the application of it as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
So one of the most helpful images is that of being a shepherd. That you might say that's a biblical image of what it looks like to be a pastor. Now there are various aspects of that. We talk about pastors as being there to be an overseer, and you're overseeing the spiritual life of the congregation and what they're taught and how they're cared for. You're there to teach them. A pastor, and that's a form of leadership, is teaching. But shepherding is, sometimes we call it soul care, where you're shepherding the hearts of people. You're attending to those things that maybe cause them guilt or shame or fear. And so on a personal level, that's what's going on. Now, there are also ways in which you're leading this community. And we don't use typically the term father in the Lutheran tradition to refer to our pastors, like, that's Father Haupt over there. Well, yeah, he has kids, and yeah, he has a wife, and But I have noticed this, and again, I'm not advocating us using the term father, but being a father and having raised, children, and sometimes it feels a whole lot like that, being a pastor of a congregation.
Yep.
And these very responsible adults, sometimes you're thinking, I need to kind of work with them with the law in a somewhat similar way that I did with my children. Now, of course, if you think of Nathan approaching David in the Old Testament, sometimes that's the way you preach the law, not as directly in some of those cases. But of course, in others, like in preaching and teaching, you're trying to lead people to repentance. And it is somewhat of a fatherly vocation. So there's that leadership approach as well. I think this was something that wasn't going on when I was at the seminary as much, and that was trying to help us become leaders of groups of people, of congregations. I actually had a pretty strong background in that because I was involved in the Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. I was involved in leadership, and the nice thing about that is you learned how to lead. You got to practice on all these other boys, right? And so I learned some leadership skills there, but it didn't really happen at the seminary. And now what we try to do is we try to put our students in positions where they have to kind of learn by doing. We have leadership immersion courses. Right. We have leadership where we sit back and we look at some of the theory behind it. So in this Pastoral Leadership and Theology course, we look at how there's structural leadership, there's symbolic leadership, there's even political leadership in the best sense of that term, and there's human resource leadership. So you look at it from all those different perspectives so that when you go into a situation, you recognize that sometimes one thing is called for more than the other. Sometimes you're really caring for how this person's feeling. sometimes you're providing them with certain structures and job descriptions and support to carry out their job. That's more in the area of structural. And so I feel pretty good about how we're forming pastors to be leaders. But I will also say, as we tell our students, you're going to learn a lot here, but you're going to learn more about this in the school of experience. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who told me this a long time ago, but it stuck with me. The tuition's pretty high in the school of experience, so be prepared to pay it.
Nice.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And the Lord is gracious, and
He is.
CFW Walther talked about the Holy Spirit's school of experience, and
Yes.
and the cost is high of learning how to rightly divide law and gospel. The cost is it actually is. We're talking about souls here, and it's really it cost Christ his life,
Yes.
and making mistakes can be costly.
But thanks be to God for Jesus Christ our Lord, because when we make those mistakes, it can become a spiritually edifying experience for us, because we remember, oh yeah, I'm not saved because I was somehow a competent pastor.
Yeah.
I'm saved because Jesus Christ died for me and rose for me.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, we sometimes borrow from what we call first article wisdom. There's a lot of first article wisdom out there. Aristotle and Plato have a fair amount of things that they have taught all throughout the ages. We've learned a lot in grade school that didn't just come straight from the Bible, but it came from studying God's creation.
Right.
And so sometimes we borrow first article wisdom, even things that people have learned in the business world, and yet we're always very quick and very open to flipping those things on their head whenever they seem like they are contrary to the gospel,
Right.
or not helpful, right?
Yep, that's right. It has to be in service to the gospel.
Yep. Yeah.
And I like the way, I talk a lot these days about creational wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that usually corresponds very closely to the wisdom literature of the scriptures, Psalms and Proverbs and various other books that are in that genre. But in this day and age, a lot of knowledge that people have is not grounded in what we would even call good science that studies creation.
Right.
It's so driven by people's own perspectives and sometimes theories that are reacting against legitimate problems, but aren't proposing something that lines up well with the way life really is, the way God created us to live. So
Yeah. It's one of these things where we can draw on experiences that we've had in life. My dad being a drill instructor meant something for me when I was a kid, and it's a big part of my formational process, but I don't expect everybody to have experienced that, for one. And then if I'm going to apply it, I have to get people there to understand where I'm coming from. So we can take subjective things that have happened to us and take them out there into the world and help people understand and different concepts that also apply to them from our own experience. But it's a completely different thing to say that because I was in drill instructor's kid, this is my life, so this is life. Mm-hmm. And so everybody should follow me on this, is which kind of what you're speaking about. This subjective things have their place, but not all subjective things are weighted the same or have the same application or the same force. But you're right. People tend to push them out there. It's one of those things you certainly have to resist from the pulpit. Right. Certainly have to resist in leading a congregation of people.
Well, and that's why we start with that biblical teaching about the pastor as a shepherd of souls, or an under shepherd. Or I like in a book I read recently where the author, a Lutheran pastor, talks about pastors as sheepdogs.
I like that one.
But that is what God's word reveals to us about that. These first article gifts that Ben has referenced here, if they're in service to carrying out that vocation, that's what we're looking for. But we're not letting those things kind of establish what it means to be a pastor.
For sure.
We're not interested in the pastor as CEO model, for example. But there are some skills and abilities that somebody who operates an organization can help a pastor with. So anyway.
Yeah, that's well put. Now, we had Dr. Mark Rockenbach on the show these last 2 weeks, actually. And one of the things that we talked with him about is the Doctorate of Ministry program. And I know that you teach a lot in that program, and you guide people through their ministry applied projects quite often. So talk a little bit about your teaching in the Doctorate of Ministry program, because a lot of times that's kind of taking a Master's of Divinity kind of intro course and taking it up a couple of notches.
Right. So that's a great question. In the Doctor of Ministry program, I've been teaching now, actually it started when I was a parish pastor in 2012, so over 10 years, the Pastoral Care and Theology class, which would be somewhat like the Pastoral Leadership and Theology class. But instead of trying to help students prepare for what this is going to be like and try to envision what these scenarios will be and how you would respond, you're working with people who are pastors who have lived that, who understand that, who come in with a fair number of answers and then want to go deeper into those topics and how we address them. Yeah. So when I teach that class, we have a seminar type format where the students contribute a great deal to the class itself, because as I tell them, and this is very true, I learn a tremendous amount from you when I teach this class. And one of the most popular aspects of the class is where they present their own, we call them best practices, to the rest of the class. And so these are really usually accomplished pastors, and we get to hear some of the best practices out there for being a pastor, for providing pastoral care, pastoral leadership, those kind of things. Also in that class, I have them right at the beginning of it their own little mini pastoral theology. Now, it's very brief compared to if you buy a textbook on this, but what I want them to do is summarize in about 10 to 15 pages their own ministry practice. And then during the course of the class, they read like 2,500 pages from a lot of different books to focus on areas that they would like to improve upon. And then at the end of the course, they write a paper where they're applying what they have learned through the readings to their own ministry practice to try to, enhance that. And I'm more of a guide by the side than a sage on the stage, if you will. I mean, I think that's true to the context. If I were to imagine I had more to teach these guys than I really do, it wouldn't be as beneficial as if we're all working together and learning together.
Yeah.
So
That's good. That's good.
Just quick, and because you piqued my interest a little bit, that 10 to 15 page paper on pastoral theology, I don't have to do it for a class, but it's like maybe I should just do it for self-edification.
I believe that's a really helpful thing for pastors, yes.
Because I never had to really do it, and as I thought about it, getting like not the obvious and like shallow one out of the world, that it begins with God's word, that should be clear. I probably would start that paper by saying that it's determined by the congregation that you currently are called to, because it's not going to look the same in every parish. It just got my brain rattling a little bit. I was like, well, where would my pastoral theology begin? I was like, well, what do the people I've been called to serve need? So as every once in a while, because we're administrators, all three of us at the seminary, we get to do pastoral ministry here. I get to do it a lot with people who are calling and saying, I think I want to be a pastor. I don't know if I have the stuff for it. It's like, well, let's talk about that a little bit. And then I serve a congregation north up here, but what I do here is not what I do there. It wouldn't work. And so is that a common in those papers where?
Yeah, so I have them focus on their current ministry context when they write that. But, some of it is universal.
Sure, yeah.
And some of it is, different pastors have kind of different emphases in the way they go about doing things. And, they get a chance to put down on paper what they're doing. Writing can be helpful in that way. Mm-hmm. It helps you reflect on what you're doing and see it more clearly. And then the idea from there, and I have them come up with certain questions or questions that they have about practice or areas they want to pursue and grow in. And then over that course, as they do their reading and as we have these class conversations, some lecture, but a lot of it conversation in a seminar type thing, they're starting to fill in gaps and expand on that. So,
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I could even imagine that a prospective student coming to the seminary could have a very interesting time just to write, what is a pastor, before they even start seminary.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting then, I think, to look at that at the end of seminary and say, what's similar? And where have I really grown, and where have my opinions and my beliefs, my convictions changed? And hopefully it wouldn't be the exact same thing in some respects.
No, that's right.
That's a really good exercise. Well, I also want to talk a little bit about we have on this podcast, we've talked through a number of different programs that we offer here at Concordia Seminary. And one of the programs that we offer and that you are the director of is the Specific Ministry Pastor Program, the SMP. I told you that I was going to ask you what SMP stood for, and then I just gave it away. So I guess I blew that question. But tell us a little bit about the SMP program. First, how long have you been a director? And then tell us a little bit about some of the basics.
Okay, sure. So the Specific Ministry Pastor, or SMP program, as you indicated, we like to say it's a ministry needs-driven program. It's very focused on a specific ministry. So just like you said, when you're writing this pastoral theology, you're thinking about this place where you're serving. In the SMP program, a student will enter really with the congregation, if you will. The congregation is kind of committing to be a part of this program. They sign a covenant that they're going to be supportive of, and this student is going to serve as a vicar there. And then if everything works out according to plan, and in the vast majority of cases it does, they will then be calling that person to be their pastor. Mm-hmm. Now, it's driven by the needs of the field, we like to say, by the needs of the ministry, in a way that it can't be filled by just calling somebody generally from the field. So in fact, it's a specific type of certification, and it's probably the most fundamental difference between SMP and the other ministerial formation programs is. And the way we describe it is you're certified to serve in the specific type of ministry in which you were formed. I'll say that again. You're certified to serve in the specific type of ministry in which you are formed.
So give us some examples of what these specific kind of ministries are.
So let's say you have this small parish that cannot afford a full-time pastor. Maybe you're the local math teacher at the high school. You're a very active layman in the congregation. The congregation is struggling with trying to figure out how to have a pastor because they can't afford to pay a full-time pastor. There's no option for, say, being a dual parish with some other congregation, that kind of thing. And so what happens there is, in a scenario like this, is that this person would choose to enter the SMP program and to become certified to serve in this small parish. He would be a student intern while he's taking online classes from the seminary, and he would have a local mentor pastor, maybe in another city nearby or something like that, who would help be his mentor and supervisor while he is taking classes and being formed to be a pastor in his vicarage and through the seminary classes. And then at some point in the process, he would be called to serve as the pastor of that parish. So he's certified to serve in that specific type of ministry, namely this small part-time pastorate. And so another scenario would be somebody who is going to be a planter of a new church. Maybe he's a large congregation in the area saying we see a need for a church to be planted over in this part of town, and we're going to support you in doing that. And what happens is they find a local guy who has the gifts for being a mission planter, who knows and understands the community there, and that planting congregation and that student enter into this process called SMP, and eventually the goal is that person plants the congregation and serves as the pastor there, and he's certified for that specific ministry then. Mm-hmm. And by the contrast with the general certification, which is, we often don't use that language because that's every other program, is with SMP, you don't put your name on a call list to be called anywhere in the church body. The idea is that you're formed for that specific place. Mm-hmm. And because of that, and because it's typically part-time, not always, but more than half are part-time, they're going to be older men who maybe have another job, like I suggested, the math teacher, or maybe somebody's retired, like your father, who's an SMP pastor, and who can serve and help out in a ministry, but are not taking a full-time salary. In fact, we have some guys that don't take a salary at all because they have a full, pension, and they just help out as a pastor in areas that are specifically needed.
We've been talking about the formation process for SMPs. It's a word. Mm-hmm. It's just us talking about going from starting before you started your seminary programming. In your seminary program, and there's a lot of formational processes, classes, experiences, and things like that, and you get molded or formed into a pastor. What does the formation of a SMP student, vicar, pastor look like? What's the process of it?
Okay, that's a great question. So we sometimes describe the SMP approach to formation as contextual education. Mm-hmm. So it's very effective. I say that having been a residential field ed supervisor for many years and a residential vicarage supervisor, one of the things that we do in SMP is we have that same thing happening with the student as an SMP vicar. And we are able to integrate the classes at the seminary with what they learn in their ministry context. So they apply in their ministry context things that the professors are teaching them, and it happens right away. And it happens in a place where sometimes we use the phrase where they have skin in the game, because it's not like you're going to be leaving this place. This is where you're going to be. Yeah. So you want to make sure you know what you're doing, what these people think matters, because you're there. And so it really raises the stakes. Our students are very dedicated. Mm-hmm. I know you probably imagine how much your dad has studied, and they're very dedicated because they care a great deal about being good at this, because of they care about these people, So the real life experiences wedded to the classroom teaching produces, I think, a really strong formation.
So there's learning in the parish, but there's also classwork that's usually done by distance and accompanied by intensive weeks. And a typical workload is almost year-round, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, it is year-round, right? And the classes are still intensive. Doesn't terminate in any specific degree, but that doesn't mean that we ease off
it's a certificate program. Yeah. And it's taught at a master's level. So if you have a bachelor's degree, you can go on and get a master's degree, because the courses are taught at the same level as the other courses at the seminary are. But we don't require them to get a degree, because what the church cares about at the end of the day is whether you have certified pastors.
Yep.
And so that's what this program is geared toward.
So there's something that follows on after the SMP program. So if a gentleman gets formed for a specific ministry in a specific local context, the church, if he's a church planter, obviously that church plant is probably not going to succeed without him. He can't just step away and come residentially to the seminary. But what if say 5-10 years in, he's graduated from the program and graduated from SMP, that is, and he wants further education, or even wants to become a fully rostered pastor where he could take a call from this church plant in Iowa to another church in Minnesota. What's the pathway look like for that?
It's a great question. And I have to give the folks in the LCMS who kind of developed this plan, I'm just a steward of it. I didn't develop it. But there's a lot of flexibility in this, and it's very forward-looking. So one of the routes forward to what we would call general pastor certification, and a number of students, in fact, in recent years have done this, is that they come to the seminary as SMP pastors, and they take additional classes to either get the alternate route, general certification, or the Master of Divinity degree with the general certification. Their SMP classes count towards that. Their vicarage experience counts towards that. So in most cases, it amounts to like 2 additional years for the Master of Divinity. And again, that's a very good way to go. If you talk to the men that have done that, they wouldn't trade their SMP experience or their residential seminary experience. Another way is through something that's purely online called the GPC program.
So the MDiv completion and the resident alternate route completion are both residential programs.
Correct.
So they finished the SMP, they were a pastor someplace, they typically would resign that call and then come to the seminary residentially to do a couple of years of coursework here on our St. Louis campus, right?
Correct. And that makes sense for some guys because they have decided that, I'm being called just into the general ministry, and so they're willing to go anywhere. So moving to St. Louis, and at that point, because a lot of what keeps people in SMP situations is that there's reasons that they need to stay locally.
Yeah.
But in some situations, that's not the case. But when people do need to stay locally, let's say they're in a congregation where they're on staff there and have a specific ministry, and the congregation says, we would like for you to consider being the senior pastor of this congregation.
SMP graduates can't be senior.
Right,
Okay.
that's correct. I'm getting there.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, you're ahead of me on that. That's good thinking. So the SMP certification restricts certain things, and one of those restrictions is you can't be in a position supervising other pastors who have the general certification or any kind of certification, actually. So if that person is going to be called to be the senior pastor, then he enters this program called GPC, which is essentially the residential alternate route done through all online. And it's really the only way to do that in the synod through the seminaries to get a general certification all online is first becoming an SMP pastor and then going through the GPC program. And when you do that, you've met all the academic requirements for that general certification. That's an additional, the SMP program is 4 years year-round.
Yep.
Now, it is part-time, but it's pretty intensive part-time.
Yep.
And then the GPC program is an additional 2.5 years. It also is an intensive part-time, so you can continue to serve in your other job and go to school part-time. You're busy, but you can do it. And it also requires you to be proficient in Greek. And that's one of the reasons for the restrictions in the SMP certification, is SMP pastors, for a variety of reasons, which we don't have time to go into here, it was decided that we would not require the biblical languages for this particular program. But if you want to go for the general certification, you have to become someone who can read the New Testament in Greek. And so that also is required for GPC and for, of course, RER and MDiv.
When that's every once in a while, again, I get questions from all over the place. The amount of times I get called from somebody outside the LCMS who found us and they want to study here, I'm like, well, you can do like graduate school, but not to become a pastor. Different topic, different question.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people will call for a variety of different reasons, like culturally for my generation, millennials, online education, distance education is very regular. And people have questions why you can't do it by a distance, become a pastor. Again, we don't have time to go into that. But they also think it's like an accelerated, quick program. I'm like, oh, wait, if you thought it was fast, like, you do it online, S&P is a quick way to become a pastor. It's like, it's not fast or cheap or easy. Like you said, requires a lot of skin in the game, not just monetarily, because, again, different conversation, but time, because not only do you have to do coursework if you have a second job, you also have to do ministry work. I'm like, your
right.
life is going to be very, you're going to have to find a way to keep a very strict calendar, guard your time, because you're going to have to study. Because again, you it's not just like you take online classes, you hear lectures, bang, you do it. You have to write papers, you have to preach sermons, you have to care for the people you're called to serve as a S&P vicar before you get ordained. And then if you are supporting yourself 9 to 5 or your family 9 to 5, I'm assuming you probably should do that and do it well as well. So it's not an easy route to become a pastor by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing that's simpler is you're not moving from your current location. But the way I've come to describe this now to challenge students when they enter the S&P program, I said, you have to solve a math problem. Okay. And the math problem is this. You have everything that you're currently doing, and now it's going to be required of you an additional 15 hours a week, plus your additional ministry duties with the vicarage, without taking anything else away from the equation.
Wow.
Now you have to figure out how you're going to solve that. So we actually even have some orientation things that we do now where we work with the students and their wives to talk through how to make this adjustment, how to become a little bit more efficient maybe in some areas, how to improve your communication skills so that when things get challenging, you have good communication at home. But they make it, and that in itself is good preparation for ministry because it can be a demanding vocation.
Yeah. It just dawned on me. So our listeners and our viewers don't regularly see our producer who's behind the camera, but Dale Ward is himself an SMP graduate.
Yes, he
and
is.
He's been for a long while our creative services producer of all of our media here at the seminary, but also serves as a pastor in his local congregation, having graduated from the SMP program. And I'm very glad, for one, that he didn't quit his day job of producing our podcast.
For sure.
But serves the Lord faithfully as an SMP pastor.
Dale's a great example of really the value and success of SMP and the way he serves in these different vocations.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's right. And President Egger and many other people have continued to tell the church we're grateful for our SMP pastors. Many of them are holding together congregations that otherwise would really be struggling. They're doing ministries that are kind of emergency in nature. We need somebody right now to step into a vacancy, and that is God pleasing. And we have a long history in our church body of making sure that Christ's sheep get the word and the sacraments through a regular ordained process of ordained ministry from the pastoral ministry. So
well said.
So good. Well, we're going to have a little fun because we always have a little fun toward the end of the podcast. And before we, I'm off script now a little bit, but before we do our official ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree,
Okay.
Dr. Thompson, I've never asked you this question before.
Okay.
So I need to ask if you can confirm or deny. Are you the mascot for Liberty Mutual? Do you know this guy?
I've
The
seen
mascot
that.
for
I've
Liberty
seen that.
Mutual.
Yeah.
My kids think that, hey, isn't that our neighbor? They're convinced that the Liberty Mutual guy is Mart Thompson.
Oh,
So
really?
can you confirm or deny that
I
you
am
are
not that.
Okay, it has been confirmed in public. Mart Thompson is not the mascot for Liberty Mutual. So,
You know who
Good.
I do get confused with around here sometimes, though, is Dr. Rick Mars.
oh yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
So I've been called him, and the other day he told me, well, I was called Mart Thompson.
Wait, you both have decided to grow beards.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right,
you were
that's
first,
right.
so I'll give you credit.
Good. All right. I just had to have a little bit of fun.
for sure.
I've never asked you that
I-
before, and we've never had. But yeah, my kids think you look an awful lot like the Liberty Mutual
So you
guy.
thought I was bivocational.
Right.
See, I'm always seeking sponsorships on the
Yeah.
show. Usually, Nike, if you're listening, send me some shoes. We'll show our listeners. But now, Liberty Mutual, if you're listening, give us a discount. Anyway,
All right. So we should do right for the picking.
Oh, I thought that was it. Okay.
I'll jump on first because Ben's pulling up his list. Right for the picking, leave it on the tree. I might have asked somebody else this, but guys, sorry, my list is. I need some work. Send me some things. Ben got sent a ton of things. Send me some stuff. Right for the pick and leave it on the tree. Water skiing.
My water skiing days are long gone.
Okay.
So I would have to leave that one on the tree. I've had too many surgeries.
You know what? Fair. But in the past, have you water skied before?
Oh yeah, I've water skied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at that. Have you gone water skiing before?
I have gone water skiing before, and I would say, boy, it could go either way for me. Like,
right.
if it was a really nice warm day, the water was flat, and there was somebody that I trusted
To drive the
driving the boat, I think that would be ripe for the picking. I'd say, okay, maybe. If it was somebody that I didn't trust, and there's a lot of people that I don't trust to drive a boat and drag me around on a lake, or if the lake was really choppy, then I would leave it on the tree. So it could go either way for me.
Okay.
How about for you?
I've never done it.
Oh.
It's one of those things where I keep asking people, and I've thought about it. So if I were going to do something of that nature, I probably wouldn't choose skis. Just like when we were just in Montana, had I gone to a slope, which is way out of the question for me, I probably wouldn't choose skis. I'd probably choose a snowboard. And so growing up in Hawaii, I did boogie
more
board
difficult.
and surf. Well, it just depends.
I'm not cool enough for a wakeboard or a snowboard.
I skateboarded and surfed as a kid.
Okay.
So I imagine
Okay.
the mechanics of it, if your body has any memory, now this would be ancient memory for my body, it would probably pick that up quicker than
maybe
skis
so.
for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just never know. Ben, I'm not going to lie. And I think maybe last time we talked about this, because I think I did ask somebody else, in the best way possible, it would surprise me that you've been water skiing before. You just don't like sports, and it's
on.
kind of athletic. That's all. That is all. I
grew up in northern Indiana, and we just have tons of lakes up in northern Indiana. So that was a big thing. It's been a long time since I've been water skiing, but yeah.
But going fast on so jet skiing, like I've clowned around and turn too sharply and you
That'll
throw
still
yourself
do.
off.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Well, you don't have to be a clown. I've thrown myself off a jet ski a couple of times, and if you're listening and you're young, flying off of anything at 50 miles per hour doesn't feel good, water or not, and water hurts if you're going 50 miles per hour. It hurts real bad.
Sure does. All right. I'll ask one that's a little more my speed.
There we go.
Science fiction.
Okay.
Ripe for the picking. Science fiction, either books or movies, just the genre of science fiction.
You know, I'm going to have to leave that one on the tree too.
Okay.
My kids like science fiction,
Yeah.
especially Adam.
Right.
But no, I'm just the realist guy.
Got it.
Although I do like some fantasy genre stuff.
Okay.
but,
Okay. Yeah, and that's fair to distinguish between those. I am. It's all ripe for the picking for me. I love science fiction, fantasy, the more futuristic, the weird, the better. Big Star Trek fan, Star Wars, as everybody knows. So, yep.
So when you were telling your story about early college days science, we've talked about me. I got a degree in chemistry. So some of the science and sci-fi stuff is like, that's just really bad science, but people are going to buy into this. I do like sci-fi. I'm a bigger fan of fantasy because at least it's otherworldly, right? It's not trying to grasp this universe in a way that it doesn't function. But yeah, I like sci-fi stuff. Yeah, why not? I'd like to geek out every once in a while. Mandalorian season 3 is out soon, right? Or is it out? Ben, you would know.
I do not believe that it's out.
Okay.
If it is, we would probably be watching it.
Sure.
So
soon, though, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Switching gears hard.
Okay.
Right for the picking. Leave it on the tree. Okra.
That I will pick in a heartbeat.
All right.
Oh.
I love
Missouri boy.
especially fried okra, but I also like pickled okra.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that I've ever had pickled okra, but no, I might try to pickle
It's
some.
outstanding.
Fried okra, bang, a little bit of hot sauce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cornmeal.
Have you ever had boiled okra though?
No.
That is-
don't ever
that-
do that.
that I would
Awful.
leave on the
It's
tree.
so awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave that on the tree.
Okra can get really slimy.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say
right.
snotty.
And it's
Yeah.
disgusting
It is
when
really
it's
gross.
slimy.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was in North Georgia, we grew okra and we loved it. It's so good.
That was always one of the favorite vegetables growing up in my household.
Yeah. Dorothy's from England, so she didn't. Well, anyway, she didn't get introduced to okra until we got married, and now she's a big fan of fried okra. Yeah, that's the only way she'll eat it, but it's the best way to eat it anyway. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Bang bang. Look at that.
All right. So I'm going to offend some of our viewers and listeners with this one 100% because I'm about to say things that are very divisive and people might actually like write into the podcast. Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. Cats.
You know, I can take them or leave them. So I'm not really you have people who are kind of strong one way or the other. I have a sibling who's a huge cat fan and a sibling who's a huge dog fan. And growing up, we had cats at our house. So we did. One of my kind of tragic things from when my kids were growing up was, you know how cats can crawl up inside a car?
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
they can.
Yeah, this didn't end well.
Oof.
The cat's name, by the way, was Aslan. If you think of Chronicles of Narnia.
Yikes.
But it didn't come back from the dead. So, yeah.
Wow.
But no, cats are all right as long as they're, not too hard to get along with.
Yeah.
Because some cats can be.
Some or most. I am an absolute leave it on the tree. In fact, I won't touch a cat. I'm terribly allergic to cats.
Wow, yeah.
I can go over to somebody's house, and sometimes people with cats won't tell you that they have a cat because they think, oh, our cat isn't ever going to come out and see anybody. But if I walk into their house,
You know they have a
give me
cat.
about 10 minutes, and I will be able to tell.
Yeah.
I also just think they're, wow, I was really going to say something mean. I think they're worthless creatures. I just have no use for cats whatsoever. My heart got broken as a kid. We had a cat that got hit by a school bus. We had cats that ran away. We lived out in the country, and I'm sure that cats got swooped up by all kinds of coyotes or owls or whatever it was. So maybe I'm just jaded, but
Okay.
oof, cats are a leave it on the tree for me.
I'm kind of like Mart. I grew up with cats. We always had a cat, different ones. One kitten that I really liked named D'Artagnan jumped off a bookshelf and broke his leg, and then had to take him to the vet. But as an adult, I'm not gonna lie, I don't want one in my house, just because. So we have a dog, and he's cuddly. He's a great dog. He does all the things you want a pet to do, and you just never know with cats. Like, you can't guess their personality, and you could get a kitten and it can grow up and not want anything to do with you, and then kind of be a jerk about it as well. So yeah, I guess after I said that, they'll probably leave it on the tree more than right for the picking for me. But sorry, cat lovers out there.
Yeah, my apologies. I don't hate cat lovers, and I get it. We have a dog, and I love her dearly, and so I respect people that have cats, but I will never have any.
Well, and then Dorothy's allergic.
I did that a little bit tongue in cheek, right? Because I know that's such a divisive.
Oh, yeah, people are gonna be real angry.
So
about
yeah. So write me in, tell me how bad of a human being I am. I understand. Yeah, that's good.
All right. The last one for me, right for the picking, leave it on the tree. Smart home devices.
I'm going to leave those on the tree. We used to have them. In fact, at the house that we lived in before I moved on to campus in the Central West End, we had a smart shower, which was kind of fun.
Huh.
Yeah, you tell it to turn on. It's a kind of a cool way to freak people out if they're walking by.
Yeah.
Alexa, turn on the shower, and it turns on. So, but and then. Talking, we do have some in our home, but I'm really not that huge of a fan anymore because I guess I am a little, I mean.
It is listening.
It is.
Yeah.
And there's with everything going on in the world of technology today, I'm not any kind of a conspiracy theorist or anybody like that or paranoid about these things, but I've started to buy into, maybe less is more when it comes to some of that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
But the novelty kind of wore off, and so, yeah.
If I were to have one, I'm the same way. Like, I've never had an Alexa or any of the other ones. Just the phone, when I'm talking and Siri pops on my phone, I'm like, you're not supposed to be listening to me. What are you doing, Siri?
Yeah. Anything that has a microphone is listening all the time.
If I were to have one, it would be a fridge. Just because with kids and stuff like that, you never know what they take out and things like that. It makes shopping a little bit easier. But the
fridges that, do they tell you what you're out of?
Oh, there are smart fridges where, so it's, I don't know exactly how it works. I haven't looked that deeply into it. You probably have to enter it in. I don't think it scans your fridge unless you know how much milk you have. They might do these days.
Right.
But you can say, this is what I've shopped for. This is the regular things. And you take it in and out, and then when things get low and when you need a new shopping list, your fridge can tell you what's necessary and things like that. I haven't looked into it. It could well scan the things in your fridge. I don't put things past technology. I don't know when we'll get far enough in technology, but Alexa's too far for me already. But yeah.
Yeah, I can sometimes put on the tinfoil hat and be the full conspiracy theorist. Although I'm deeply into technology, and so because I have a phone in my pocket all the time, there's always a microphone listening, and so I think the best thing to do is to live a life that is publicly available, where you have no secrets, and where you strive to just, live the life that God wants you to live.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I'm a little bit either way.
Sure.
On that one. All right, final one for me. Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. Changing your own oil.
In this day and age, I am very happy to leave that sucker on the tree.
Me too.
I used to do that back when I was first a pastor and crawl under the car and all those kind of things, and try to get the grease out of my fingernails before I'm distributing the Lord's Supper on Sunday.
Exactly.
Drop your wrench into the pan full of hot oil.
Yeah.
No, I'm very happy to let the folks down at the Quick Lube or at the car dealership take care of that one.
Exactly. Same here. My father-in-law is a mechanic, and I really I have tremendous amount of respect for him because He's able to like literally wave a wand over something and it goes from piece of junk and not working.
That's a guy you want to know.
Yeah.
Or be related to.
he fixed up a 1960s Mustang for each of his kids when they turned 16. I mean, what a gift.
Wow.
I don't have that gift.
Oh, I was like, where's Selena's at? Anyway. Oh, but it exists though.
Yeah, it's at her folks' house. We have a 65 Mustang that's a brilliant royal blue, and it's in her parents' garage. We drove it to her junior prom, and we drove it to our wedding reception. And then we had it in Georgia with us. And
my favorite car of all time, and I could be wrong on the year, but there's a James Bond, and I'm pretty sure it's a 73 Fastback Mach 1.
Oh, yeah. That is a cool car.
Like, that is my favorite car of all time. Yeah, I didn't know Selena had a Mustang. She got real cool in my book. It's hers, not yours.
It is, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
One day.
No, I know. No, not one day. Driving a Mustang doesn't make me cool.
I mean, it would make you cooler than me, and then what else do you need? No, I'm just messing around. Yeah, it's leave it on the tree for me as well. Like, because I owned a home for a short period of time, cut grass, up to plumbing and electricity fix things in my house. Some electric things, if they were easily wireable and things like that, as in like they're electric based, they're fixtures in the house and you plug them in. You don't wire your house. Mm-hmm. I acquired all these skills, and then we moved on campus and don't even have to shovel our sidewalks when it snows outside. So I'm very happy to let people do stuff for me when it comes to that kind of things. Yeah. Also just time, right? Like changing your own oil. You got to do it, then you have to take it somewhere anyway for it to be disposed of. So I just let them do it. At the end of the day, I don't know how much money you're spending. I mean, saving by changing your oil.
I think you're right. Not a lot.
Yeah. So I don't need to feel like a man anymore. I'll let somebody else feel like a man for me.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Dr. Thompson, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. We'll certainly have you back on sometime in the future. But before we sign off, if there were one piece of advice that you could say to anybody thinking about becoming a church worker, for us, probably more specifically a pastor, but we can keep it general if you want, what would that one piece of advice be?
Well, don't take this the wrong way, but somebody told this to me one time, and I thought it made sense. It says, you know that you're cut out to be a pastor when you can't think of anything else you can do. So by that, it means it's like you can't do anything else. What it means is that you've just got this sense that this is really what God wants you to do.
Yeah.
And the person who gave me that advice also followed up with saying, you need to have that firm conviction that it is God's will, because you might find yourself in position of doing things that if it wasn't because God called you to do it, you probably would check out of this vocation. And so, I don't know if that's going to inspire anybody, but I felt it was pretty good advice for me, and it kind of helped firm up my conviction, I think this is really what God is calling me to do. I can't think of anything else that I should do. So anyway, that's my piece of advice.
Good.
Well, thank you. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who have that nagging at them and they just have never followed through. So if you're listening and it's nagging at you, at least shoot us an email and let's have a conversation. Oh, Dr. Thompson, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything that you've contributed to the show today. Thank you for being a great neighbor, every once in a while watching our kids for us so we can go on a date night.
Our pleasure.
And then, thank you for your service to the church, pre-seminary, everything that you do for CSL now. You're certainly a treasure and a joy and a huge contribution to everything that happens here on a day-to-day basis, forming the future generations of people called to go out and serve and preach Christ and Him crucified to the world. So thank you. And thank you all for listening and for joining us. Make sure that if you're nagging or you have that kind of internal nag, maybe this is something that you might want to do or have been created to do, reach out to us, csl.edu admissions, and fill out a request for information so we know who you are. And if you know somebody who you think might be a good church worker, don't wait for them to become a church worker to tell them that you always thought that.
Right.
Tell them now, because you might be the person, that extra encouragement that gets them to follow through. Yeah, like, subscribe, and thank you for joining us under the fig tree. We'll see you next time.